And Avi comes out of his room and he's like, I have only seen product market fit twice in my life. Once when we were doing this EOR thing 2 years ago, and once with the idea that we got into YC with. And I'm like, all right, man, you're right. Let's go for the one that we saw product market fit with, man.
Davik, Goel from Shor, the founder and CEO. Okay, what is Shor and what are you building?
Yeah, so Shor is the fastest, most affordable payroll for global teams. It's really quite simple. Today you have some great EOR companies out there, but for a large segment of the market, it's completely unaffordable. And so if you look at the average salary, for example, for a remote global employee in India, for example, it's 20,000 USD per year. And today, other EOR providers charge $7,000 every single year just to pay that employee. Wow. So the math doesn't actually make sense for a lot of companies. And funny enough, for me and Avi, we've been building startups for the last 2 years, and similar, it didn't make sense for us. Shor is trying to fix that problem and basically serve this market that can't necessarily pay that much to current EOR providers in a novel way. These guys had to go through a lot of rapid scaling in 2021 when they had customer demand because of COVID. Which worked well for them at the time and is still setting them the trajectory. But there's a lot of lessons we can learn, and there's a lot of fat that we can trim. And so, with AI and with our approach and all operations point of view, we're able to trim a lot of this fat in the middle. And also with stablecoins, we can do some really interesting services there.
Incumbent products, like you mentioned, can be really expensive. Yeah. And what are you doing differently that allows Shor to deliver this at such an amazing price?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things.
Davik, Goel from Shor, the founder and CEO. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, David.
Would love to just start with, okay, what is Shor and what are you building?
Yeah, so Shor is the fastest, most affordable payroll for global teams. It's really quite simple. Today you have some great EOR companies out there, but for a large segment of the market, it's completely unaffordable. And so if you look at the average salary, for example, for a remote global employee in India, for example, it's 20,000 USD per year. And today, other EOR providers charge $7,000 every single year just to pay that employee. Wow. So the math doesn't actually make sense for a lot of companies. And funny enough, for me and Avi, we've been building startups for the last 2 years, and similar, it didn't make sense for us. And so Shor is trying to fix that problem and basically serve this market that can't necessarily pay that much to current EOR providers in a novel way.
Oh, interesting. So it sounds like you faced this problem firsthand while you were building a previous company. Was this a pivot or was this an insight from a previous company?
So it was a pivot within YC, but an insight from a previous company we were building. So we and Avi actually tried building this out with a mutual co-founder 2 years ago. This mutual co-founder was in Thailand, and we saw the insight back then. But I'm sure as someone who's been in fintech and accounting and around this space for a long time, you can relate, anything in fintech requires a little bit of you need an in into the industry and a capital investment. Mm-hmm. And we were bootstrapping the company at the time. So we ended up narrowing down our scope into making more of a specific creator payroll system for another client at the time. But it's something we realized was a massive issue even back then when we were starting working on it. And so within YC, and I can talk about the journey, but ultimately what we ended up realizing is it's more of an issue. It's become a bigger issue even more today. Mm-hmm. And there's some really great technologies we can use to really solve it for the segment. And so that's basically where we decided to pivot in the YC batch.
That's really exciting. So let's go back to Waterloo.
Yeah.
Super famous engineering school, super famous co-op program. What was your experience like? Did you become a founder while you were at Waterloo? Or tell us about your experience going through that program.
Yeah, I think to talk about my experience in Waterloo, I got to dial back a little bit earlier. A lot of people, they end up stumbling into what they want to do and figuring it out. I was a little bit lucky. I realize that now, that from a very early age, I knew what I wanted to do. So even though I grew up in essentially the Texas of Canada, this place called Alberta, and in a city called Calgary, where everything was about oil and gas, from a very young age, I was like, no, I want to go build stuff in Silicon Valley. I didn't want to go to California. And everyone around me, especially at the time, was like, what the hell are you talking about? Going into oil and gas. What are you talking about? What is Silicon Valley? Why are you going to go work at this company called Apple? What is all this stuff, right? But I grew up in the age of YouTube, and I had that insight from all the way back then. And so fast forward, to grade 9 even, I was pretty dead set that, hey, I'm going to do computer engineering at Waterloo. And so when I got into Waterloo, that was sort of part of the plan. Now, it's funny because I was telling somebody this yesterday. I've been fortunate enough to achieve a lot of the goals I've set out to do, but funny enough, the journey has been so consequential, or so much stuff happens within the journey that by the time I reach the goal, it feels sort of insignificant compared to what I just went through to get there. But yeah, I mean, I came into Waterloo with that as the plan that, hey, I'm going to do computer engineering and end up coming to California and working on some great products. And eventually ended up doing that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a familiar feeling. I know what you mean. You know, when you, especially as a founder, you set these goals and you like grind and then you hit them and you're like, oh shit. Oh, I guess, you know, that goal is hit, but like, you know, it feels, it doesn't feel like you expect. Have you found any strategies around like setting expectations with yourself or, you know, enjoying the journey with, you know, all these ambitious goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think for myself, you know, I'm a big basketball fan. And so, you know, growing up, I was a big Kobe fan. And, you know, you see this guy in the gym shooting free throws over and over and over again. And obviously everybody harps on the 5 championships that he won with the Lakers, but it's really the process of getting there. That was the real bulk of the meat that we sort of ignore, but we just see like, hey, the goals they achieved. And I think for me, what I ended up realizing on the founding journey or even in Waterloo or whatever, you know, it's really just embracing that process. That'll keep you sane, or else you're going to go crazy if you just keep waiting. Like, when am I going to win the championship? It's going to be tomorrow. It's going to be a week from now. And that'll just make you go crazy. And so for me, yeah, like I think embracing that part of the process has been a big deal. And then the second part is, you know, no matter how I'm feeling, good, bad, there's going to be days, like, I don't care how cracked anybody seems to be. There's going to be days where they have a down mood, a happy mood, whatever, but just get something done every single day. It might be a little bit some days, or might be a lot some other days. But if you can just keep a bare minimum, like, okay, I'm going to make inch by inch, I'm going to make some progress, you know, you eventually get somewhere. And I think I've sort of embraced that mindset with what I'm doing here at Shor as well, or just in general, like what I've done in my life.
I love that. And so how did this relate to, you know, going from Waterloo to being a founder to YC? Did you get into YC on your first try? Or what was your journey into YC?
Definitely not.
I don't think any of us have.
No.
Some people have. It took me 3 tries.
You know, it's funny because I mean, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but if you look at the current batch, it's either people who have grinded for a while, like myself and my co-founder Avi and some other guys that are on the batch, or it's some like really, really incredible kids who are doing some incredible stuff at a very, very young age. And there's like a dichotomy in the batch.
Yeah, that's
you'll see that.
You definitely see that from the outside. You've seen some of the founders becoming just super young. I mean, was there like a 16-year-old in this batch?
Yeah.
I
mean, and crazy stories, right? Like I'm looking at what they're doing today, and I'm like, at 17, I was just like, I was doing really dumb stuff at 17, just enjoying my childhood, I guess you could say. And it's crazy. I mean, kudos to that, man. Like, that's crazy, right?
Wow.
But yeah, no, coming back originally to your original question about my journey from Waterloo, I think the beauty of Waterloo is, yeah, like, you know, you go through this rigorous engineering program, you go through the internships, and very, very quickly you realize that, hey, I can do this. I can be a really great engineer, and I'm at the same level as anybody. I can confidently say that. Like, I feel like, yes, I am a top 5 to 10% engineer, and Waterloo gave me the confidence to do that. However, the downside to Waterloo through my time was that it was always this mentality of, how do I go work at the big tech companies? And there's actually a phrase in Waterloo called Cali or bust. It's literally the mentality that people have, that like, hey, I need to get to the California tech companies, which is great. I mean, like, obviously that's a great ambition and goal to have. But the problem is, eventually what ends up happening is when you graduate, all your friends are going into the California big tech companies, and you're sitting there like, hey, if I don't do this, you feel this real like imposter syndrome, where it's like, what do I want to do? But I have to go do this. This is like part of the path. And so for me, I guess I was somewhat lucky enough, or whatever. I was driven enough that I knew, like, hey, I definitely want to do startups. I don't want to necessarily go work in big tech. But, you know, I want to also come out to California. So how do I find the balance of that? And so I ended up, you know, after Waterloo, I ended up working at a startup for a while, but eventually realizing that, hey, this is, you know, working at a startup's not the same as doing your own startup. And so that's eventually when I ended up leaving that. So,
oh, wow.
Very interesting journey.
and how did you come up with that first idea that you decided to work on after leaving that first company?
You know, funny enough, I didn't really have an idea. I just knew that, hey, I need to take the leap. So basically what ended up happening, to give you a little bit of context, you know, this is June 2023. So I guess I was 23 or 24 at the time. And I sort of had a quarter life crisis in some ways, where I'm like, if I've always wanted to do startups, and if I don't take the leap now, when everything's in my favor, like my parents are doing well. I'm a single dude, so I don't really have that much like, responsibility, I guess you could say, and I have my engineering degree. So if I can't take the leap now, how can I kid myself and say when I'm 30 or 35 and I have maybe a wife, kids, and all this, mortgage and all this other stuff, that I can take the leap then? And so I really just left without a plan. And, I was just like, okay, I just got to go do something.
Yes.
And so basically, the first guy I was working with is this really interesting guy named Michael. We're still really good friends. He was in a similar boat. He was also a Waterloo guy. And so we just started working on like this idea he was working on for a little bit, which was a student freelance marketplace, which very interesting. I guess it was interesting, the timing and the idea, but at least we got started somewhere. And we started building from there.
And in that experience, did you how did you approach building and getting customers? And how is that different to how you're approaching it today at Shor?
I mean, it was very much just trying to figure it out. You just have no idea, right? So for me, it was like, okay, now that we're doing this, what does it actually look like? Just trying to even figure out what does go-to-market even look like? How do you find customers? So, it was funny. Right when I left, there's this thing in Toronto held every year called Collision. It used to be held every year. Now they've moved to Vancouver and it has a different name. But I got lucky enough to get a ticket for that right when I decided to go to my own startups. And what was really great is this conference was maybe 3 days. So I went all 3 days to it. And the first day, I'd never been to a conference like this before. So the first day I did all the normal, go hear all the talks and hear what people are talking about. And then I realized really this is just consultants learning about AI, and I'm not getting much value from the talks because I have a pretty good understanding about the technology itself. But that's when I actually started talking to people, and I just put myself out there. And very quickly I started realizing, okay, these are the things that resonate with people. This is what doesn't resonate with people, and start formulating a pitch around that. And that was really my first experience with, okay, now that now that you're talking to people, how do you make them resonate with what you're doing, and what are the things? How do you actually approach that interaction, I guess?
Totally. And you kind of I totally can relate to that. You kind of what is this person's facial expression when I tell them this one liner?
Yeah.
And do they get it? Do they start looking around behind me to get out of the conversation? Yeah, that's always fun.
And it's a numbers game as well. I think what you end up realizing is, look, you're not, even if it's the greatest idea in the world, pretend you're making $1 trillion company, eventually becomes $1 trillion company. You're still five or six people out of 10 are still not going to believe in it,
right?
When you're telling them, that's just the reality.
Yeah.
So you just have to find the 4 out of the 10 that do, and work with them.
And do you think that experience building the college student freelance marketplace has that had a big impact on how you're building Shor today?
Well, one thing I took away is marketplaces are one of the hardest things to build. Oh my God. I had a lot of respect for Brian Chesky before I did that. And then after I realized, marketplaces are the Dr. Doom of startups. It's I have full respect to people who build marketplaces, and that's why they're very, very sticky. But yeah, totally. I mean, at the end of the day, the collective experiences of going through that and going through the other startups we ended up building, they all led up to Shor. And I think one thing I realized about myself is, you find very vertical specific founders who are I am the fintech guy, I am the consumer guy, I'm the B2B guy. I think for me, I've always been a little bit more agnostic, where really it's just interesting problems in different domains and different approaches that people are taking. It's domain agnostic. I'm just more curious about how are they approaching it? And what's been nice is whether I'm building a student freelance marketplace, whether I was doing creator payroll system like I did later, or consumer apps even, that approach has always been similar. And what's been interesting is I've been able to take threads from consumer or from fintech or whatever and apply it within these different products. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. So fast forward, at what point did you decide, I'm going to apply to YC?
Oh man. So there's a little bit of a story behind that one too. So basically, if I take you back to when we did the marketplace, that was June 2023. I left. By September 2023, the writing was on the wall, with AI especially. There was a little bit of interesting tailwinds going on there. So I ended up leaving that. And I was just randomly traveling around working on different ideas until the end of November 2023. And that's when me and my co-founder Avi met. We had a mutual co-founder, Colin, in Thailand that we were working with. And so we'd all known each other briefly for a while, but we ended up actually working together starting November 2023. And yeah, me and Avi were bootstrapping with Colin for like a year till December 2024, which is right now. And we went through a lot of stuff, which I can get into. But ultimately, January 2025 this year, or the end of December and January 2025, I was back in Canada for a while. And, I was talking to Avi. I was like, I think I'm pretty burnt out. We were bootstrapping. Things weren't really working out. I think I need to just, figure it out, take a break. And so January 2025, I was in Canada. I had no idea what I was doing again, fast forward. But I was like, I know the first thing I need to do is just come back to Silicon Valley and then come back to SF, because I'm not going to figure it out in Canada. I'm going to figure it out there. And so I moved back here January 2025, more semi-permanently as a founding engineer. And, fast forward to May, Avi, me and Avi have always been in touch, but Avi reaches out in May, one day before the deadline, like, hey, I'm working on this new thing. Do you want to hop on? And I'm like, sure, let's apply to YC. Let's see what happens. And go figure, we actually get the interview and get in. Wow. And that's how quickly things can change.
Wow. So the day before the deadline, you submit. And who did you interview with?
So we had John and Brad. We have an insane story.
I want to hear it. Let's go.
I think let's dive in.
We got time.
Basically, I was working as a founding engineer. The startup I was working at, really, really great guys, great experience. They were basically the team behind Tenor, the gift keyboard. Ended up selling that to Google, and then this was their new startup. So really, really cool team.
Oh, nice.
Shout out to Seek Easy. And they were going through, the fundraising as well, and they eventually closed it. So I was like, okay, I found my little home. They just finished fundraising. Things are going well. Things are looking up. And then I had this calendar thing on my calendar saying, hey, YC deadline. And I saw it was for the next day. So I think this was Monday, and the YC deadline was Tuesday at 8 p.m., if I'm not wrong, or 9 p.m. So I messaged Avi on the Monday, and everything's going well. I was like, yo, the YC deadline's tomorrow. Do you want to apply? And he's like, okay, sure. Why not? Let's talk about it. So I get home, after work. It's like 6 or 7 p.m. And, he tells me an idea. I'm like, nah, I'm not really feeling it. I tell him an idea. He's like, nah, I'm really not feeling it. And he's like, I did do this thing for my friend a couple of weeks ago. Maybe you can apply with this. And when he told me about it, to be honest, I was like, this can't be legal. like there's no way this is legal. And he's like, no, it's legal because of XYZ reasons. It was like a fintech idea. And I'm like, there's no way this can be legal. And so basically we ended up arguing for 3 hours. I got pissed off and I got to go back to bed. I'm like, screw this guy. I got to go back to work tomorrow. I'm not applying to YC. Everything's good, whatever. So now it's the day of the deadline. But the important thing was this. Before I went to bed, I started ChatGPTing what he was saying. And he was like, actually, and ChatGPT was also like, no, he's right. It is legal because of XYZ reasons. I was like, whoa, okay, this is interesting. And so the next day, I get home from work. And the deadline is 9 p.m. I think I get home at or 8 p.m. And I think I get home at 7. So literally an hour before the deadline. And I tell Avi, I'm like, you know what, man, screw it. If you want to apply, let's apply. Because ChatGPT gave me enough confidence, yeah, because it's legal. And I might put my 2 and 2 together. And literally in an hour, we made the whole YC app.
Wow.
The whole YC app, we put it together to the point where our founder video, I'll never put this application publicly, by the way. Our founder video was so bad. You literally hear me saying, yo, Avi, I think we need to do another take. And he's like, we don't have time. You hear that in the video that we sent to YC. And in the demo video Avi was doing, I literally asked him in the middle, hey, are you done? And he's like, no, I'm still doing it. And that's all stuff we submitted to YC. And we literally submitted at 7:59 for the 8 p.m. deadline.
Wow. And
somehow we get it in and I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. YC app. This was my 5th or 6th YC app. Avi's applied 12 times before we even got an interview. None of us had got an interview before. Wow. And then we don't hear anything Wednesday. And then Thursday, randomly out of the blue, I get the email that we got the interview. And I was like, wait. So yeah, I hit up Avi. He was in New York at the time. And I'm like, I guess we have an interview at YC on Monday now. What are we doing here?
Wow. And so John and Brad emailed you, or who emailed you about the interview?
No, I didn't know it was John or Brad.
You didn't know it was them
was
yet.
Just
okay.
The basic
it was like you
YC.
got an interview on Monday.
Exactly.
Okay. So how did you prepare? Did you prepare for the interview?
Well, I mean, I obviously this first idea. I was like, okay, how is this even possible?
Can you tell us the idea? That's okay if you.
So basically, it's a very, very interesting idea. We basically have merchants who could only accept like basically it was a way for merchants who could only accept crypto to accept fiat payments, to accept USD. So basically their customers could send Zelle payments, and then we like using this protocol called ZK P2P and some stuff in the background, it actually converted into crypto. So very interesting idea.
Interesting. I mean, that's still a big unsolved problem, right? I mean, like, I think, this became there was a big use case around this with NFTs were really hot, right? Like, and which was that company that let you buy NFTs with your credit card? Do you remember that one? It was like, it kind of got a lot of hype at the time. This was like 2021.
Yeah, that was a great time.
It was something gateway or something. Anyway, okay, so you guys were building this thing. The idea was you can pay with fiat and it'll convert in real time into crypto, and the merchant will receive it as crypto.
Yeah, and basically there was a little bit of a gray area where, if you know anything about fintech, you have to do KYC on the purchaser, but in this case, because of the conversion process, we didn't actually have to do that.
Oh wow! So
and this is where I was like, "There's no way," because I have fintech experience. So I'm like, "There's no way this is actually legal." And he's like, "No, it is. It's like a gray area." And he explained he tried explaining it to me, but I give Avi a lot of credit, but he's always like, "No, just trust me, just trust me." I'm like, "How can I trust you? I need to know how this works." So that's basically where that happened. Now we got the interview. And I'm like, what did I just sign myself up for? Let me actually really understand, like, to the law now, why this is possible. And so that's basically like my whole prep for the next 3 days was like understanding, okay, it's a gray area, but how is it a gray area? And how can we actually make this into a business?
Wow. And so you go through the interview process. Did you think you got in after you did the interview?
I mean, it's only 10 minutes. Like, I mean, you've been through yourself, right? So it was really quick. I mean, I felt prepared. But I mean, I'm more of a business guy, so I had like this little narrative prepared. I had like my little business speech. Avi is much more direct, and to his credit, I think YC likes more of a direct approach because the partners can smell BS very, very quickly. And I think the more directly you tell them exactly where you're at, the better it goes. And so he basically took a lot of the lead there in that first interview. Which I think was really good because I think that really resonated with them. I would have spun this beautiful business narrative, but I don't think they were the guys that would be the right audience for that, I guess you could say. So.
No, that's really good insight. I mean, I think that is a big takeaway around YC is like direct, plain English. They're
not the guys.
No jargon. Right. Like be honest, and if you don't know, you don't know, but be determined to find the solution.
100%. I've told people for the interview as well, like that exact same thing. I'm like, look, man, there's certain people you might be talking to where you want to spin the vision and the narrative. These are not the guys. These are the guys where you're like, look, man, we made this in a week. Some people want it. I don't know why. Like we're trying to figure it out, That's exactly what you have to bring up to them, right? Yeah. And I think that resonated with them. So
awesome. So okay, so you get accepted. You get the call. Who called you?
No, so that was also interesting because I mean, I guess for the audience, the YC process, it's like you do the interview, like I think it was at 3 p.m. And that day, if you get in, you'll get a phone call. And so, it's funny there because I think it's between 5 and 9. They usually do the phone call. And if you get an email, then you're out. And so I literally messaged ChatGPT at 5. I'm like, yo, chat, it's 5. What do you think? Chat's like, yo, you're good. This is prime time. You're good. 6 p.m. I'm like, yo, chat, it's getting a little later now. Chat's like, don't worry. The first round has gone out, but you might be in the second round. 7 p.m. Chat's like, yo, this is getting a little bit worrying. 8 p.m. Chat's like, yeah, I don't know if this is happening. And by 9 p.m., Chow was like, yo, go back to Canada. You're done. Like, never be a startup founder again. Chow was just roasting me. And I was like, by 9:30, I was like, okay, whatever. I had at least I can say I had the interview, go back to building startups. It's fine, whatever. But at 9:30, I think, or 9:45-ish, that's when John emailed us and basically said, hey, thanks for coming in. I had some follow-up questions. Do you have time for another 30-minute interview tomorrow? And so obviously I call Avi and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing this again. I guess we're going for the 30-minute interview. And so, the next day, this is where, like the interview, I think it was at 2 or 3. And obviously super stressed the whole way through. I'm sure you guys relate to that as well. But this is where that research I did over the weekend, where I really just locked in and made sure I understand the fundamentals of what we're doing here came through. Because basically all the questions John had around the idea was the questions that I was answering myself over the weekend. And so I just like locked in and I answered all the questions he had. And then he, John, I love John. He's a great guy. And he had the line at the end where, we went through the whole thing. I was super locked in, answering all the questions, like bam, 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 bam. And he's like, okay, I got one last question for you. And I'm like, all right, John, bring it to me. I'm ready. I've answered all your questions. He's like, do you want to join us for the summer to do YC? And oh my God, that was
Oh man,
quite the showman. But like that was a great feeling. So
yeah, it's incredible because I think it's when YC makes a bet on you, it's like your first investor, right? Yep. And it's like it is a huge. I feel like as a founder, it's a huge. It's a very emotional, sort of powerful moment. Like you're like, holy shit, these guys believe in me. Like maybe I can do this, So I know I remember that's super exciting when that happened. So okay, so you get in, and the batch probably starts, a month or two later. You came with this idea, but you didn't finish YC with that idea. So what was the at what moment did you decide we're going to pivot to global payments?
So I mean, we started YC. I still think it's a really great idea, but very interesting customer segment that needs that idea. And I realized a month into YC, I was trying to reach out to this customer segment. I'm like, I am not the guy to address this problem. Like it is. I just don't have these connections, and I'm just not in that world. And so basically, what ended up happening is, we spent some time on it, but then we ended up realizing, okay, this is not going to work out. Like we're not going to be able to do this. And that's when we ended up pivoting into looking into on-ramps for large businesses, because with Genius Act and Clarity Act passing here in the US, with stablecoins, we realized that, hey, a lot of large financial institutions would want to move their money on chain. And so there should be some great on-ramps and off-ramps for them to do that. And this is we went through like pivot hell. By the way, pivot hell during YC is something else. Like pivoting anyway is very hard, but during YC when like every single day feels like it's critical, it is so brutal. But we ended up going into the stablecoin infrastructure there about on-ramps and off-ramps. But that's when we actually spent a little bit more time, and we ended up realizing that there's actually a lot of really great infrastructure on the crypto and stablecoin side. And even on the AI side, a lot of really great infrastructure that's already been built out, and half our batch is building it out. But very, very few people who are actually owning the application layer on the top level and using it in a novel way, and owning customer relationship and building something really unique. And this is where, for me and Avi, now harping back to the 2 years we've been working together, we're like, whoa, we just had this click in this moment where we're like, hey, these could actually come together and to form something really, really interesting here with global payroll. And that's when we decided, like, okay, no, like this is actually perfect. This is the perfect time. We've done this before. We know exactly who to sell to and what we can do here. Actually, it's funny. So the real story, if I really put it's like we're in pivot hell. We're doing the stablecoin infrastructure. We realized, hey, there's a couple of providers that don't know if it's gonna make sense. And Avi comes out of his room and he's like, I have only seen product market fit twice in my life. Once when we were doing this EOR thing 2 years ago, and once with the idea that we got into YC with. And I'm like, all right, man, you're right. Let's go for the one that we saw product market fit with, and let's go for the trying to build this EOR again, and with equipped with the new technology and what we can do, and that's what we decided to do.
Wow! And so this is at what point? How much time until demo day do you have when you make this decision?
I think it's the beginning of August, so like 5 weeks.
5 weeks. Wow.
Yeah, so quite the. But this is where it's like me and Avi have built stuff in fintech before. We built systems like this. So for us, like getting all the fintech set up or the platform set up was just our bread and butter, because we've done a lot of this. And so within a week, we were able to get our contractor product out to let people hire and pay contractors internationally.
Wow.
And it's because like for us, it's like stuff like KYB, KYC, and the whole process there. It isn't something foreign. It's like we know this.
Oh, interesting. And so, incumbent products, like you mentioned, can be really expensive. Yep. And what are you doing differently that allows Shor to deliver this at such an amazing price?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. I think we're looking at some of the less, like these guys had to go through a lot of rapid scaling in 2021 when they had customer demand because of COVID, which worked well for them at the time and is still setting them with the trajectory. But there's a lot of lessons we can learn, and there's a lot of fat that we can trim. And so, with AI and with our approach and all operations point of view, we're able to trim a lot of this fat in the middle.
Interesting.
And also with stablecoins, we can do some really interesting services there too.
Oh wow! So there's a lot of good why now.
There's a lot of really good why now, but but the thing is with the payroll market in general. I mean, accounting. I'm sure you guys feel this too. It's just a massive market. Like the thing is, these other EORs in the space, they can focus on just enterprises, and they'll be perfectly fine. Like there's multiple multi-billion-dollar companies just in domestic payroll here in the U.S. I can name off 10 off the top of my head, and talk about legacy players. I've been there for 40 years, and they're all multi-billion-dollar companies. And the exact same phenomenon is true about global payroll too. It's just a relatively newer space. I mean, it's been there for a while, but it's really, ballooned, I guess, in the last 3 or 4 years.
Wow. So since you sort of made this, took the new direction with the company, you finished YC, so you're in the summer 25 batch.
Yeah.
Where is Shor today?
I mean, we're just rolling on things. We just wrapped up fundraising a couple days ago, and
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a whole process on its own.
Yeah,
that's another pod. But just finish that up, and for us, it's very clear. I mean, I've made companies now for the last 2 years. I know what going in the desert sort of feels like when you're building a product and there's not actually a pull there, and you're just like, oh, but look at how amazing these features are, or whatever, and nobody really wants it, and you're like, oh man. But for us, it's very much been the other way around, where people really want it, and now it's just a matter of actually executing on it, delivering, which is obviously a really good place to be if it's where you want to be as an entrepreneur, especially as an early stage startup, but also very scary because it's like, okay, now how do we actually deliver on this and make sure we're making good on some of these promises that we've put out there.
So where can we find you? Where can we find you and Shor today online?
Yeah, I mean, you can always DM me on whatever channels you want, or tryshor.com. Feel free to book a meeting with us. Always happy to help anybody who's looking to hire global employees or contractors. Yeah.
Amazing. So at the end of our episodes, we do this new thing now where our previous guest asks a question, and so we'll jump into that. And so the question is, building in today's world with AI and sort of how quickly the future is like hitting us. We see different companies building with different visions. So you have Cursor, which is like building for, the IDE today that people are writing software in. And then you have companies like Lovable that are just creating a whole new way to create software. As you think about building today, how do you think about building for your customers? How do you prioritize the future and what's possible versus like what they need? How do you think about the future of AI when you're building Shor?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's like intelligence is effectively being commoditized, which is very, very interesting. And so for me, on a surface level, it's like, yes, you can start optimizing in terms of how can you get things that were manually done in a faster way and use AI to do that. That's very interesting there. But ultimately, it's like the personalization and other aspects that are, I don't know. It's a very interesting question. For us today, it's very much just trying to remove the bottlenecks that traditional systems have and using AI to do that. And I think that's like the very ground level how we start today. And then tomorrow, it's like, okay, how do you make AI a collaborator with humans? I think there's been a lot of stuff about eliminating humans in the loop. Or just completely eliminating humans. But I think ultimately AI systems will do best with humans in the loop. And how do you basically offload some of the more menial or manual tasks to AI and basically have the humans just drive decisions? And so even with our payroll system, like I said, today it's just very much how do I get rid of like the big bottlenecks that are there in EORs today and use AI to do that. But tomorrow it's like, okay, now how do we actually put our customers in the center? And let basically AI do tasks in the background while our customers are still in control. And I'll give you an example of that. Like, so for example, one of the things that's really big with us in Shor is we have these AI teammates that live within Slack, WhatsApp, or Telegram. Because if you look today, even doing simple actions like getting a 1099 for your contractor on a dashboard is something the big companies hire an HR specialist for, which is effectively just somebody whose job is just living in the dashboard. Or founders have to spend 2 or 3 hours every week or 2 weeks just basically just doing some tasks like this. But the way we see it is like, hey, you should have an AI team in the background that if you just want to get 1099 for a contractor, it brings it exactly to the places you're working at, and that's right where you need to be. And so for us, that's where the AI centered experience is going, where it's like, okay, not only like how do I just slap a chatbot on a dashboard, it's like how do you actually make a new novel experience that is able to provide a new, like big value to our customers, and that's how we see it.
Amazing, amazing. And okay, before we go, would love to ask you to provide a question that we should ask the next guest.
Ooh, let me see. So relating to this last question, two things that I think are going to be very important in the age of AI as moats is distribution and design. So I'm curious for the next guest, how do they think about distribution and design in the age of AI?
Love it, love it, love it.
Because I'd actually like to know. I'm very curious to hear what they say.
Yeah, I'd like to know that as well. Awesome. And one last question for you before we go. I know a lot of what we focus on as founders is distribution and building the product and getting to market. And there's also other parts of building your business that come up in the back office, everything from incorporation to payroll like Shor.
Yeah.
So how do you think about building your finance stack at Shor?
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking a little bit before the podcast. You know, during YC, you're sort of just everything is very loose all over the place because you just don't have time to set up systems. But this is now like on very top of my head, or on top of my mind. I think ultimately there's two things, right? Like a lot of these systems are extremely critical. So obviously there's some level of trust you want with the system inherently, which I know is sort of weird to say as an early stage company because I'm trying to gain that trust with customers. But ultimately, like it is a decision making factor for a lot of people out there. But the second thing is like look, when these systems go well, it's great. You actually don't even think about them. It's just running in the background, and it should be something you don't have to necessarily spend a bunch of time on. But when it doesn't go well, that's when it's like something that's working great in the background really becomes a nightmare. And, you know, more likely than not, every company is going to experience that where one of these systems go wrong, whether it's payroll or accounting or whatever. So I think having the right team that you can trust and you know will figure it out is massive there, and support that you can trust there. And so that's the way I look at it too. And so like, for example, you guys at Fondo, of course, you know, you guys have already, I can tell you guys have a great support, a great team, but also other systems as well. I think the people have been very, very active, very, very responsive, and have basically given me this comfort that, hey, even if things go wrong, they'll be there. I think that's the way I look at approaching these systems, alongside just the base like functionality, of course.
Yep. Awesome. All right, Davik, so great to have you. We got to have you on again sometime.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, David.
Thanks for joining.
Cheers.
Cheers. Fondo.com, the all-in-one accounting platform for startups. Get your bookkeeping done, your taxes filed, and cash back from the IRS. The average startup gets $21,000 back every year. Fondo.com.